In the era of COVID-19, it's easy to forget there's a presidential election later in the year. However, it's harder to forget the wonderfully diverse field of candidates that were running for the Democratic nomination. It was hard to forget because the mainstream media never shut up about it. Not only were the candidates diverse, they were hiring diverse staff. The majority of senior staffers for top candidates, Vox told us, were women. Apparently, this is a good thing. Although the New York Times reminded us that regretfully all the top-ranked candidates were awful white people. And then something even more awful happened. The wonderfully diverse field started to melt away. How did the most diverse field of candidates in history come down to this? Two old white guys, which as we now know is one. Interestingly, no one pointed the finger at the majority female senior staffers running the campaigns. Remember the golden rule of left-wing activism? If a minority or female candidate doesn't succeed, then the only explanation is that it's due to racism or sexism. Now, of course, this is not to say that Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee, was the best choice. Biden is a compromise candidate. He's a moderate, someone that a broad coalition of Democratic voters can get behind, or at least that's the theory. Unlike Bernie Sanders, who has an enthusiastic but narrow support base, because even moderate Democrats are uncomfortable electing a socialist. And then there's Elizabeth Warren, who again inspires enthusiasm, but mostly amongst the woke. For all the diversity of the Democratic field, they were largely unimpressive, but then I would say that because I'm against big government advocates of any kind. But on to the wokeness. Pew Research recently conducted a poll asking registered Democrat voters this question. Regardless of who you supported for the Democratic nomination, would you say the fact that the likely Democratic nominee is a white man in his 70s bothers you or doesn't bother you? 41% of registered Democratic voters said that it bothered them that the Democratic nominee was a white man in his 70s. But if that seems high, have a look at the breakdown by race. Only 30% of Hispanic voters were bothered and 28% of black voters, as opposed to almost half of white voters. And the younger and the more educated you are, educated in inverted commas, the more it bothers you. As Robbie Suave wrote at Reason, these results demonstrate a point that comes up frequently in my book Panic Attack, Young Radicals in the Age of Trump. The progressive activist fixation on identity, race, gender, etc. is not broadly popular, even among the left of centre Americans. The demonstrations of performative wokeness that are part and parcel of life on college campuses seem alien and alienating to just about everybody else. When progressives push the Democratic Party to be more consciously identitarian, they arguably make it more unpopular among a swath of gettable voters who are turned off by these kind of appeals. But most importantly, the voters who are expected to be enthused by the appeals to racial identity, people of colour, don't care nearly as much as the undergrads at Middlebury, Oberlin and Reed College. Exactly, the fixation on identity is mostly a luxury grievance of privileged young white people that rack up $100,000 or more worth of debt to be educated, not in the ethos of Martin Luther King, but the woke bullshit of identity politics. Now, whilst it's easy to make fun of these idiots, it is worrying that the generation that will take the reins of power in future decades have absorbed this poisonous ideology. We can only hope that they grow out of it or get a real education. As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.